Let me see. Here we are. Fantastic. All right. Well, we've already said hello, so that's a good start.
Okay.
And just to let you know, so as you know, well, you're actually new to the course, but a lot of the students who are in the Certificate 3 at the moment, they were dealing with a trainer called Claire. And I mean, Claire was fantastic, but unfortunately she left Open Colleges. So
Oh,
I'm now filling in for Claire until further notice. There might be somebody
okay.
else. But for now, I am the person that you can ask about Certificate 3. And just to give you a quick background of my experience, and then I'll let you know how this whole session will work tonight. So I did my Bachelor of Early Childhood, which allowed me to go into primary schools and early childhood services. So I have experience across working in primary schools, working overseas, and then I actually spent about 5 years in the primary school setting, and then decided, well, I did an early childhood degree, so I want to kind of take it to the childcare centres and kindergartens. So I tried to really span out and make sure I had a lot of experience across the whole field. And then I got into the
Mm-hmm.
training and assessing side of things, and stuck with this because I really love working with adults, which was a very big surprise to me, but I found it just as enjoyable as working with children, um, in terms of learning the profession and learning what your duties are. So that's just a little bit about me. So if you have questions about, um, where you can go with your certificates and anything like that, feel free to ask as well. And you'll
Okay.
find that all the trainers just have a wealth of experience in different areas. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's a bit of a hot tip. If you need assistance with career advice, we can help with that. Um, if you want to have a chat. So now this session tonight, so like I said earlier, we can just kind of talk through it as I go through each slide. I was just going to
Mm-hmm.
say that you could also, if you have any thoughts, you can put it in the chat option, and we can come back to it later. So if you have a thought and I'm talking too much, feel free to just write it down in the chat section. We can always come back to it. Okay?
Okay.
All
So can
right.
I call you? I'm confused. You're Michelle Christie, so
No,
you have.
I'm sorry. I'm Christine. My goodness, silly me. I've actually got Michelle Christie's login, who is my manager, but I am
Oh,
Christine Pereira. That would have been
okay.
lovely to introduce myself properly
Okay.
to you.
Okay. So, okay.
Yeah,
That's
so
Christie.
yes, and you'll see me on the homepage, on Open Space homepage. You'll see me listed as a trainer. So that's who I am.
Yes, I.
Okay, so just a note as well. I'm not sure, Louisa. Do you know that we all have our separate roles? I'm I'm like the Certificate 3 course coordinator, but then you also have Lyndall Wilkins, who's your workplace assessor. Are you aware of that?
No, no, no. I don't recall that name.
Yeah.
I
So
remember Preet. There's a Rim Preet or
yes,
something.
Rimpreet's one of our trainers. She's fabulous. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, it's a she because I don't know. It's a name I never heard before. So you never know if it's a she or a he, right?
Yeah, no,
So
she.
it's a she. And she answered me back regarding I made a question and I'm also with you and I think I haven't contacted anybody else.
Oh,
Maybe only the other day I contact uh, the support to
oh
know
yeah.
if they can unlock me the second level because meanwhile I'll receive the results. Maybe I can start reading or something
Oh yes.
doing,
Yeah.
yeah,
To unlock a
instead of
module.
waiting and doing, yeah,
Mm.
module 2. And
Yeah, that usually
so
takes,
because
after you submit your assessments, that should take about 48 hours to unlock a module. But if you're
I
having,
should, yeah, I should be early because I could be reading, right?
Yeah, it's unfortunately just the way the system works with making sure that
Sure.
everything's logged, but um, it's not too long, hopefully, and then you can kind of get started into the next module. It kind of gives you a chance as well to reflect a little bit on what you've done, and then you can take it in and
Yeah.
yeah, move forward with the next module. So, but yeah, it is about 48 hours that it takes to unlock the next
Okay.
one. Yeah,
Uh,
but
okay.
yes,
So
if you do have any questions about work placement, you can ask Lyndall. But like you said, you've already spoken to student support and some of the trainers, so good on you. That's fabulous.
yeah, but I think for work placement you have to wait until module 11, right?
Module 10. So you need to complete Module 10 and then you can
And
start
then
your work placement. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
so I have to wait.
Yes, yeah. And it's good to do that just so that you have enough information before going in. Otherwise, it's really overwhelming if you go in and you have to do all the other work for that too. All right, so
Yeah. Yeah. So
let's keep going then. Let me see if this, here we go, the screen is working, which is good. So with your Certificate 3, so that will obviously allow you to become an early childhood educator. But with that, you need to understand, and if I'm to do any presentations, even when I do this with other students, I always start off with this slide with something about reflective practice, because that is really, that's a very big component of being an early childhood educator. So if you understand that from the start, especially with legal and ethical, I know it doesn't sound like there's a huge connection there, but there's a massive connection. Um, Understanding how to reflect as a professional is very important from the start. So if you just have a look at what I've written there, so I've written, so reflect, why did you join this course? And then reflect on, so are you actually aware of your responsibilities going in as an educator? So with,
yeah, sure.
yeah, so I mean, from my own point of view, I remember when I started studying early childhood, um, I was not aware of all my responsibilities, of the accountability, of, you know, that I actually had responsibility for those children in my care on so many levels, you know, even beyond health and safety. And that's something that does come with your studies and also with experience, but it's important to keep questioning that. So that's something to keep note of while you're studying, especially in this first module. All right, so let's keep going. So this is what we'll be looking at today. So what is an early childhood service? The reality of your role as an educator, your legal responsibilities and ethical obligations. So you see I've got two different words there. So legal responsibilities because you are bound by law with your responsibilities. Ethical obligations, you know, ethics is something that you do out of with your morals and professionalism and what you feel is the right thing to do in your role. Whereas with legal responsibilities, that has legislation involved. And then the next thing we'll be looking at is all these acronyms. So you'll find that in early childhood. So NQF, NQS, EYLF, ECA, and you're meant to know what all of those are. Don't stress,
Yeah.
you will learn all of that over time and it all makes sense eventually.
Yeah.
The next 2 points there, so these two are the main pieces of legislation that you need to know as an early childhood educator. So the Education and Care Services National Regulations, nice and long, and the Education and Care Services National Law. If you are unaware of the rest of the legislation that matters, those two are the main two, because that tells you all about your role and it really does guide you actually in what you need to be doing in the service, especially the regulations. But that's something, you know, don't think that you have to understand the law, the national law and the national regulations in this first module. It's something that you're going to have to use right throughout and then even more when you're in a service. So don't stress too
Okay.
much. Just make sure that you know what it is, that you know that that is the regulations that you work to. Okay?
Yeah. And I guess also it's not because I don't want to know about this. Of course, I think it's very important, but I think if you are so unlucky that something there's a problem like a legal problem in a in a daycare,
Yeah.
I guess lawyer will have to come and help you, right?
Oh, yes.
Because
Yeah.
I guess even if you know very like you understand very well the national law, the national regulations,
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, finally is a lawyer the one that will really give you all the advice. And but
Yes.
of course, a professional, I understand that in every profession you need to know
Yeah.
what are your responsibilities and what are your rights and everything, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And I think that's kind of what shocks students the most because there is a lot of legal stuff that you do need to know. And that's because
Mm-hmm.
the main reason you're working with other people's children. So you have to make sure that you are doing everything legally and ethically correct,
Sure.
So, but and this kind of leads me to my next point is this is why we have this unit as in the first module to be almost
Yeah.
like a bit of a, not a wake-up call, that's the wrong thing to say, but I guess um, almost to just let you know that this is what early childhood is. So if you go like back to the first slide about reflecting, like do you actually know what your responsibilities are? Because in module 1, that's where you can look at it and go, wow, I did not know that I had to know about these laws and those ethical obligations and this and that and blah 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 blah. But it's
Yeah.
really important that you pay attention to this first module. And I say to students, like, when you learn legal and ethical, keep that information because you're going to be using that through the rest of your course. So
Yeah.
yeah, like
Yeah.
whatever notes you take, keep them.
Mm-hmm. One question, I have a little doubt about the EYLF.
Yes.
Like, because when I'm reading or the textbook or something, it says, okay, EYLF page 20. So what is that? Is because if you Google and you put EYLF, it comes out the belonging, being, becoming, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So EYL is the same as the document?
Yes. So EYLF, it's the Early Years Learning Framework, and that is
Yeah.
called Belonging, Being, Becoming. So it's all one thing. So,
Okay.
yeah, Early Years Learning Framework, Belonging,
Okay.
Being, Becoming. Yeah.
Okay.
We like long
Because I
names.
thought it was the I thought that belonging, being, becoming, it was part of the EYLF, but the EYLF was like a bigger document that was somewhere. So okay, now everything is clear. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. So yeah, belonging, being, becoming is what the EYLF is all about. So it goes through. If you download that document, it talks to you
Yeah,
about what. Yeah,
yeah, I love it. I think it's the like the most encouraging document that I have seen because it's so like, yes,
yeah,
life is happy,
yeah,
everything is perfect.
yeah. That's good to hear. That's really good because it is. It's a really encouraging document, isn't it? It makes
Yeah,
you want to go out
it's
there.
not like the other, like so yeah,
Yeah.
kind of boring, but this like yeah, finally something nice to read.
Uh, it's important to know though with the EYLF, that's a guide to practice. So it's not like a piece of legislation. So it's not like the Education and Care Services regulations. The EYLF is only a guide. So it's not even your curriculum. It tells you, it gives you like a guide of how to make your curriculum. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, but
It's
but it's also like showing how you could make like a perfect world for the kids.
Yes,
So it's
that's
so
wonderful.
nice. And yes, like,
Yeah. And they call that
and I try to make a perfect world to them, but of course letting them making their own mistakes and things. But
yeah, of
yeah,
course. And that's all part of the learning too, you know, like it can't be perfect. There has to be mistakes and
of
you know,
course.
things happen and that's what they learn from as well, which is fabulous. All right, so I just went too fast then. I'm just going to, so the next slide, I just wanted to hone in on this section in the learner guide. So this is the section with just useful readings and websites.
Yeah,
We
that's
kind
the
of,
one of the first pages of the.
yeah, yeah, that's right. And, you know, this is really useful. Some students, not you, I'm just saying some students do tend to kind of flick through the first couple of pages, but I always, when I get messages, I say, oh, have you had a look at this page? Because this gives you a lot of information. There's fantastic websites and readings to look at, especially with legal and ethical. The website
Mhm.
resources are really good. And if you keep these with you, you can use this throughout your course. They're really helpful. Okay.
Okay.
Now, so let's have a look. So what is an early childhood service? So have you ever been into an early childhood service, Eloisa?
Here in Australia, inside, you mean?
Yeah, like actually inside the building with, have you seen what it looks like or?
Well, yes, 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 I have. Yeah, I
Right.
went with a friend to pick her her
Oh,
son.
right. Yeah. And was that like, was it a big center that you went to or was it a smaller place?
No, 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 middle size, like
Yeah.
not like small. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's, I mean, just because there's so many different types. So there's long daycare, which is, you know, sometimes they operate between the hours of 6 and 6. And
Yeah,
yeah, right. It's
this one
just,
I think between 7 and 6,
oh, okay.
so it
Yeah.
should be like,
So yeah, it was long daycare. Yep, that you went to. I have worked in a long daycare centre in the city, and they offer preschool sessions as well, which most of them do. But
mm,
that's really interesting because the difference is if you go to, there's different types of preschool sessions. So they have sessional preschool, which means that, so you have the 3-year-olds and the 4-year-olds, and they can come in for sessions. So
mhm.
the 3-year-olds, for example, come in for two
Oh,
3-hour sessions, whereas in long daycare, they can
sure,
stay the whole day. So that's the difference,
sure.
if that makes sense. Family
Yeah.
daycare, which is it's a much smaller setup, and it is in
Mm,
someone's house that's been accredited. So the person goes through the checks with the authorities and everything, and they usually only have a small amount of children that they look after. And out of
mhm.
school hours care is after school care. So it's
Sure.
another care facility that sometimes is worked within the school centre itself. And it's,
Okay.
yeah, just it's care so that parents can come and pick up their children when they finish work, but it's just that extended bit of time. Either way, this
Mhm.
all operates under, it's an early childhood service. So it's important to understand how these all work, especially if you go into, you know, say you get a job in a long daycare centre. It's important to know how many hours you need to work because they're open for a really long time. So your shifts will need to be
Yeah,
monitored and made sure that you're doing the right amount. You need to know your rights. You need to know their rights. Whereas if you
sure.
worked in a preschool, um, you'd work for very different periods of time because of the sessions. If you worked in a sessional
Okay.
kindergarten or preschool, I hope that's making
Mhm.
sense.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's just something to take note of. So make sure you know what the types of services are so you know what you want to get into. All right.
Yes,
So,
but if these long day cares, they are open, for example, from 6:30 in the morning to 6:30 in the afternoon. That's a 12-hour shift. So they have uh, different staff, like
Yes.
one staff in the morning, one staff in the afternoon, or is
Yeah.
the same staff the whole day?
No, they have different staff. So, for example, when I go in for my job, I might
Yeah.
start at 6:45, and I would.
Okay.
So, if I start at 6:45, I would only work until the latest would be 3:45.
Okay.
That
Sure.
would be the latest. So, but usually when I go in at 6:45, I finish earlier. So I'd finish at 1 or 1:45.
Okay.
Whereas the staff member that comes in after me, so if I start at 6:45, I'm the first one there. Then somebody comes in
Mhm.
at 7:30. Then somebody comes in, and this is just my centre that I work at. It's very different across the board. But it
Sure.
basically, they try to make sure that you have so a 9-hour shift because you get an hour for lunch, if that makes
Sure.
sense. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
how they work out. Whereas if you're working, I mean, I've worked in a sessional kindergarten as well, and I used to teach the 3-year-old group. They would come in, they'd start at 11 and they'd be there for the 3 hours, but I would go in I used to go in at 9. So I'd get 2 hours planning time and I'd leave at
Sure.
about 11 to 12, 12 to 1. I'd leave at about 2.
Okay.
So you see how it's very different? It all depends on the service that you're at.
Sure.
But you've got to make sure you know your rights in your work hours and make sure you get your lunch breaks and your tea breaks, and
Yeah.
that's important because it can get
Yeah.
confusing. Um, so just with this next slide I've got up here, so the reality of your role as an educator. So this might seem really straightforward, but this is really important for you to know. So you are responsible and accountable for the children in your care. So that means you are responsible for them when they come in and until they are signed out. So and this is where, you kind of don't realize what a big responsibility you might have, especially when it's pickup time and you've got all the children there and you think, okay, great, it's pickup time. So their parents or aunties or grandmothers or grandfathers have come to pick them up. All right, I'll let them go. All right, everybody come in and take your child. That is not how it works. You are still accountable to make sure that each child has gone to the person who is meant to pick them up. So that's like that, the
Sure.
portfolio in for legal and ethical. That there's a question about that, about
Yeah. Yeah.
releasing, yeah, which is, and the reason why that's in there is that is a very important thing, um, that can
Of
cause,
course.
yeah, and it can cause very big legal problems, as you can
Of
imagine, um, if
course.
you release a child to someone else. So
Yeah. Of course.
yeah, and there's things put in place there, like on the enrolment form, you would write down who the child can be released to. You would have to know those people, so that's where it kind of crosses over legal and ethical. So your ethical
Mhm.
obligation is to make sure that you know who that person is, so make the effort. Whereas that's also a legal thing as well because it's written on the form.
Sure.
So
But here in Australia, from what I know, they just because they know the persons that are coming, but there's no I'm from Peru in South America,
yeah.
and they're in the early child centers.
Hmm.
They issue to the parents or the carers like a kind of ID that is from the center.
Okay.
Okay, so the kid can't be picked up if that ID is not there,
Ah, right.
unless it's the parent you really, yeah.
Wow, that's great.
So then, because we have a lot of issues with, that parents that get divorced and then suddenly maybe, I don't know, the father is a drunk or I don't know,
Mm,
whatever. And,
yes.
and then, yeah, you have to be very sure that everything is under control and that you are not giving the child to someone that won't protect that child.
Yes,
So,
exactly. And
yeah, so,
you're right though, because especially with situations of divorce, um, as an educator,
yeah.
you have to know what paperwork you need. You need. Have you heard of a parenting plan? Have you heard of that before?
Uh,
It's called,
maybe that word. I think I read something about the parenting, but I don't recall right now.
yeah, so
What is that in enrollment form you have to tell, I don't know if that's a parenting
that's
thing.
separate. A parenting plan is kind of when you, so if there is a situation with a family where there's a divorce or, there's other
Oh, okay.
issues. Yeah.
Yeah,
You,
I know what you mean. No, with a different name, but I know what you mean.
yes,
Okay.
yeah. So, being aware of things like that, making sure you're following the plan, having the paperwork and storing that securely, that's also part of your legal obligations.
But I
And
guess here in Australia, when that happens, the persons in charge, the authority in charge,
yeah.
will immediately communicate that to the child care center, right? Or not?
Well, if there is paperwork, it's actually up to the parent to provide it. So if there is, um, like a restraining order, something like that,
Yes.
um, the
Yeah.
if there's a restraining order against the mother, that would need to
Yeah.
be provided to the centre by the other carer for us to know.
Yeah.
So otherwise you don't know. So you have to really you
How?
have to find out. That's where you find out that information on the enrolment form. Um, and you would have to make sure that you are getting that information. So when you go
Sure.
through
So,
enrolment, sorry, go ahead.
so that means that if that happens and the other carer doesn't inform to the daycare center,
Hmm.
and then the mother come to pick up the child, then you are in problems.
Yeah, that causes a very big problem. So that's something
But
where,
how do how do you know? That means that you will have to every day log in a like a legal system to know if any of the parents or carers have been have a restriction to pick up the kids, right?
yeah, I mean, more often than not, during enrolment, if you've actually seen an enrolment, have you seen an enrolment form before for a centre?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
online.
it's quite you ask quite I wouldn't say invasive but really important questions. So you would find out during enrolment if there was a situation such as that, um, and if you didn't know, that would cause a really big problem because if something did happen, the police would definitely get involved. Um, you would be questioned as to why you were not made aware of that and why you didn't find out. Um, the other carer who doesn't have anything against them they would be questioned. It would be a very, very big issue, very, very big. So you've got to make sure you get all that information at the start, and there's stuff that has to be presented for your child to be enrolled as well. So
Yeah, but
yeah.
example, everything is under control, everything is legal, and everything is perfect in January, and
Mhm.
suddenly in July that happens, and nobody informed you. How do you know?
Yeah, see, this is where the ethical side of your role comes in. So you need to be building partnerships with families so that you are aware of what's happening. And you
Oh,
need to make sure that you are talking to the parents or, the other family members whoever is the carer for the child so that you are aware of what's going on. And
okay,
yeah, does that make sense? So that you need
sure.
to make sure that you are aware of the whole
Yeah,
situation as well. Yeah,
that will be the only way to know.
yeah. And of course, if there's something, the authorities might inform you too if there is something that's going on. You will eventually find out, and you are
Okay,
informed by the department and various other people. If there's something big happening, there is a way that you'll find out. But the best way to find out is to make sure that you develop those partnerships and that you're aware
sure.
of the families that you're working with.
Okay,
Okay, so
okay,
I'll keep moving through this. Um,
sure.
So just to keep going, so, you know, you've seen this in front of you. So it's basically being able to work in a team. That's a really big one. If you are not a person who enjoys working in a team, you're going to have a very hard time in early childhood because it's very team orientated. And that leads to
Sure.
also being able to interact effectively with children and communicating with the stakeholders. So do you know what I mean when I say stakeholders?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's you know, that includes children as well as stakeholders. And also being able to interpret written information, because as you can tell from your first assessments, there's quite a lot of theory involved with early childhood. So,
Yes.
you know, understanding policies and legislation. All right. So if you have a look here now, that image of the National Quality Framework that's in the learner guide,
Yeah.
does that make
Yes.
sense?
Yes, I
Yeah.
saw it.
So there's the components of the National Quality Framework, and that includes, you know, if I go back to my other slide, I'll just do it really quickly. Just here where I said the Education and Care Services National Regulations and the National Law, that's part of the National Quality Framework, and also the NQS and the actual frameworks themselves, so the EYLF. So if you can, that's a complex thing to understand, but I would be trying during this module to understand that, to really know what the NQS is and what the regulations are, what the law is, what the EYLF is. So I'll break it down really quickly for you. And of course, you know, don't, like I said earlier, don't worry if this sounds so overwhelming and, you know, you're kind of thinking, gosh, how am I meant to know this now? This is something you will learn over time as well. Okay. So the NQS, which is the National Quality Standard, that gives services guidelines for something called best practice. So it looks at the different areas of practice, like the program, partnerships with families, relationships with children, and it's best practice for a service. And that's what they look at when they rate a service as well. So when I was working at a kindergarten, we had our rating and assessment, and there were areas, the kindergarten I was at was fantastic, so we got a very high rating, but there were areas that were lower that we then work on. And we have something called a quality improvement plan, which is a QIP, and you take those areas from the NQS and you go, okay, what do we need to work on? So for us, it was programming and planning, which was really interesting because we were just kind of one under the highest rating for programming and planning, but that was an area that we went, oh, okay, we thought we were good at that, but no, what do we need to look at? And when we kind of sat down and looked at it and looked at what the crux of quality area 1 really is, we went, right, so we're not being consistent as a team. We're not being consistent with our practice, with our planning and programming. So the NQS really helps you as an educator to go, okay, how do you do this as a whole service? If I move on to the regulations and the law, the regulations and the law tell you how to operate. So how should an early childhood service operate? That's the law that you have to follow. So for example, the regulations have a section in it about ratios. And if you don't follow the educator to child ratios, then you can't actually run your service. You'll get in trouble for that, you know, so because that's the legislation. The EYLF, which is what we spoke about earlier when you were talking about belonging, being, becoming, that is a guide to practice. So like I was saying earlier, it's not a legal document. The EYLF is not something that will stand up in a court of law, but it is a guide to your practice, to how to make your program. So when I've planned with my groups before, you know, like say at the start of the year, I look at learning outcome 1 and I go, okay, I need to help these children feel safe, secure and supported in their environment. So I'm actually going to base a lot of my program on learning outcome 1. So do you see how you know, I'm not, like, for example, I don't use the whole of the document for that first bit. I just use it to help me and go, I want the children to work towards learning outcome 1. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, so that's if that, you'll, like I said, you'll come to learn more of that as you go through the course. Um, Now, on top
Okay.
of all that, there are the other things. So if you just underneath the picture there, I've written, I haven't written this actually, that's a lie, that's taken straight from the Learner Guide. Building codes, child protection, disability standards, so all these various things to just be aware of. So that, I mean, that one image in itself, um, you know, it's a good idea to even print that bit out and stick it on your wall so that you are aware of what you need to know. What are the legal and ethical considerations of what I need to know? So that image there is
Okay.
very important.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me keep going now. Oh, good. Yes, I've put a case study in here so we can talk about this. That will help with understanding. Have you heard
Mm-hmm.
of the Early Childhood Australia Code of Ethics?
Oh yes,
Yeah,
it's like poster.
excellent. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's kind of, you know, that's like a code of conduct really with um,
Mm-hmm.
how to act with, and that has all the stakeholders in it. So what are your ethical obligations with children, with staff, with the community, with, you know, it kind of helps you go through what your professional code is. Um,
Yeah.
and I've written here that legal and ethical obligations do work together, but they also can clash. So that's kind of, it depends on what the situation is. So, you know, I think there's an example in the assessment that talks about social media.
Uh-huh.
You remember doing, oh, I don't
Yeah.
think if you've done the portfolio, you might not have done that yet, but there is one that talks about social media. And, you know, I mean, we make friends at work. So you might have a friend who posts something
Yeah.
online.
Not that case. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, that's where it kind of clashes. Like what is your role? What's your ethical obligation to the service? And, you know, as a friend, that's an issue. Legally, you're
Yeah.
meant to,
Oh,
sorry, go ahead.
no, I mean it's both. It's
Yeah.
like ethical, legal because yeah, it's totally
Hmm.
out of control.
Yes.
Yeah.
Goodness. And, you know, we've got to be so careful with that now, don't we? With social media, it can get really out of control. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely. But if you have a look at this case study here, so her father, Daniel, comes in to the service to pick up his 4-year-old daughter, and she has paint on her clothes. Annabelle loves to paint and do arts at the service, but Daniel is upset that she spends so much time doing arts and crafts. He feels that she should be focusing on learning how to write and knowing the alphabet. So what would you do and why? So what is the issue here? So, you know, if you think about this, the issue is the expectation on the child. The issue
Mm-hmm.
is also much bigger. So I'm going to link this to the NQS, Quality Area 1, which is Programming and Planning. There's a link there because that father is basically asking you to change your whole program. So you've got to figure out if you're comfortable with that and what you would actually do about it. So if you
You're actually asking. Sorry.
Oh, feel free to jump in. You don't have to answer this one if you don't want to. I'm just going to keep talking about it. And if
Hi, not a problem. Uh, well, I'll answer you what I answered in a similar case that it was I think it was a father that the son or a daughter, I don't remember, the child was dirty and this father was upset because they weren't maybe using too much time on preparing the kid for formal school
Yeah.
or similar.
Hmm.
So what I answered that first I will like feel the parent that we appreciate a lot that he or that he communicates with us and tell us what are their concerns, and that there is a constant communication between parents, carers, and educators. And then I will explain the father that we are definitely following the national program of education, and explain him more or less what we have been doing, and explain him that playing and getting dirty and all that kind of reactions or consequences of doing activities is part of learning, and yeah, like is the best way the child can get all the concepts that will be important for the education.
Yeah, that's great. And you know, there's a lot of documents that you can attach to this. So like I said earlier, there's the NQS. With everything you just said, then that's basically you have very good knowledge of the EYLF, because you're able to say what the focus of your curriculum is, which is, you know, to let the children play and get dirty. So you can use that document as well when you're talking to that father. And there's also the rights of the child, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. And, you know, you refer to the right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's, you know, really important there. Also, with the regulations, if you look up the regulations and what the requirements are for the outdoor space, the indoor space, you can find a connection there too. So there's actually legal and ethical considerations here.
Okay.
There's a lot of ways that you can really talk to parents if you make sure you know the documents. So that slide earlier about the NQF, if you know those documents, when a situation like this happens, you can really answer them appropriately. Okay. So let's get moving. So here are all these acronyms that we love to use. Okay, so this first one, ECEC, that is your main body for our profession, and the website is fantastic. So if you ever need assistance with anything to do with early childhood, ECEC is the place to go, and they have links to, you know, the National Quality Standard, and I mean, I'm sure you would.
They have great.
Yeah, and they have really good just links to best practice and understanding what your requirements are and what your role is. They're really helpful with really informative. But that's important to know, ECEC. That's the main place you go to. Then, of course, National Quality Framework. So these are all the things that we went through earlier. But if you just kind of go down to the last 2 points, so ECA, Early Childhood Australia, their website as well is really helpful, and they help you with, have you heard of the Learning Hub at all, the ECA Learning Hub?
ACA, I think I checked that web.
Yeah.
The one that I haven't checked is ABCB, Australian Building Codes, not at all.
So that's just, the reason I put that in is because with legal and ethical, the building codes kind of give you guidelines with the actual structure of the service and what the requirements are and what the rules are with, you know, with what needs to be put in place. So that's the reason I put that in, just because it is a main part of legal and ethical, you know, with understanding the regulations. So that's just there for you to help you a bit more with understanding the regulations. But Early Childhood Australia is one of the main places for you to go to for professional development and just like updates as well on what's happening in early childhood. I'd say they're probably the second biggest website you should be looking at in after ECEC. ECA is very good.
Yeah. Well, but the law and the regulation are pretty recent, because it's like 2010 and 2009 and 2011. The other one is, they're very recent, right?
Sorry, which is that? What was recent?
In all this frame, the laws,
yes,
the law and the laws and the regulations are recent, are
Yeah.
Only 7 or 8 years ago in some cases.
Yeah, which is really good because then it's current,
Yeah, yeah,
and even
yeah. That's so good.
even early
I'm
childhood.
sure, yeah, I'm pretty sure in other countries must be like 40 years ago or so.
Oh dear.
We're
Yeah.
very-
Yeah, and that's because the National Quality Framework, so they whenever there were a lot of changes that happened to make sure that practice was consistent across the whole of Australia. So that's how like the
Okay.
NQS with their idea of, standards for practice, that brought in the rating and assessment system to make sure that the whole of Australia was trying to reach
Yeah,
best practice. So that's why it's so recent as well. Um,
that's
but also with Early Childhood Australia, so they write the Code of Ethics and they revised it in 2016. So that's pretty recent too,
yeah,
which is great. So early childhood is a very
yeah,
big deal, which is great to see. Great to see it being honoured like that.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's the base of everything. So
Yes,
that's
yeah,
good.
that's exactly right. That's it. That's how important it is. So that needs to be
Yeah.
acknowledged. Okay, if we look at this slide, so this one here, so basically what I've done here, I've put this case study as a part of this presentation because if you look at the second point here, I've written keywords. So when you approach your assessments, one of the
Mm-hmm.
main things to do is even if it's, so you see how short that blurb is. So let's imagine this is our long day care centre and we're required to supervise the children as they play outdoors. One of the main
Okay.
things to do is to first find the keywords, and if you find those, you'll actually be able to get the answer a whole lot more easier. So,
Sure.
so I've identified the keywords here. So, long daycare centre, children supervise, play outdoors. And if you
Okay.
look at each of those keywords, what you do next is you try to connect it to something. So, for
Sure.
for example, long daycare centre. Um, what I would connect that to is, okay, it's a long daycare centre. Let me look at the picture. Does that look like a long daycare centre environment? It's an outdoor environment. There must be an indoor environment. Where are all the educators in that picture? Um, if it's long daycare, they have really strict rules about being sun smart. Where are all the children's hats? So just things
Right.
like that. Maybe it's not that time of year, or should they be wearing hats anyway? I mean, and, do you know what I mean? So try to make the connection from the keyword, um, and
But
work.
it must be summer. They have short sleeves, so they should be with their hats.
Yes, yeah, exactly. There you go. So, and if you have a look at the age of the children, I, I can see one educator, she's kind of behind a big barrier there on the side. Um,
I can see
yeah.
this.
But that's the main thing that stands out to me when I look at this
Oh,
picture. But
oh, you mean behind the small kid with the red with the white shirt and the red kind of vest or something? That?
no, on the other side. So see, there's a big blue thing there. I'm not quite sure what
Yeah.
that blue thing is, to tell you the truth. But behind that,
The
there's
person?
a yeah, there's a lady sitting there. So she's not really supervising that well. We can't even see her.
Yes, because the hair is dark as the blue thing in the back, so it doesn't look like a human being.
Yeah. No, she doesn't look like a human being. Oh dear. Well, we have a lot of problems with this outdoor setting, I think, that we need to fix.
Yeah.
But, I mean, even if you look at this and if you know, um, the regulations, the legal stuff, you can even look at the equipment that the children are using and think about how appropriate it is. So it might be fine, but you've got to be able to look at it and question it and say, okay,
Yeah,
is that actually safe out there? Look
sure.
at the pathways. Are the pathways safe? The shrubs, the bushes, are they placed well? Do they cause a hazard? you know, this is what I mean. Like when you're working through your assessments, try to find those keywords and
Sure.
connect it somehow to a document.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's keep going. Oh, there we go. Question and answer time. So I hope I have not just talked my whole way through and not let you really say
No,
anything. But if you have any,
no worries. Always question when I have a question. And yeah, even
yeah,
always. So
yeah,
no worries.
yeah. So did you have any other questions that you wanted to ask at all?
No, I think I make all the questions through your presentation.
Excellent.
So yeah, so when I see the results of my written report and there was another piece, the portfolio, then I will know if I'm in the right way or if I have to correct something.
Yeah.
Um, Up to now, I think like what I'm trying to do is, as I told you in the beginning, when I see a question or I see a case study, just answer immediately and then I check what are the suggestions that are in this document of additional resources
Yeah. Yeah.
there,
That's great.
document that helps you. And then I'll check it again and I'll try to link it to some of the information, but sometimes because I've been checking the different documents, I don't remember. Oh, I'm like, yes, I read that. I saw that, and then I can't find it again.
Yeah.
So that's a while to find it again.
Oh,
Because of course you really have no idea. Yes, they're going to ask you about that.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
well,
No, it sounds
I'm
like
trying.
you're doing a great job, you know. And I think even through that, the discussions we were having, you were making the connections already. So, you know, if you keep like those key areas that we were talking about with the documents and, you know, even cutting out that diagram of the NQF and, you know, like almost giving yourself that little bit of help because I have that, you know, I've been teaching for years and I have that little diagram of the NQF. I have that stuck up in my little folder and I make sure I give myself
Yeah,
little pointers all the time because I mean, there's a lot of theory, so it's good to help yourself out, I
yeah.
suppose. Yeah,
Yeah, and I think as a professional, it's always important that you know what are the rights and the wrong in the system,
that's right.
because you never know when you can encounter a parent or a carer that like these difficult persons that don't really are focusing on the best for the child, but they're just like picky and they want to find the bad things on everything. You know,
Yes,
unfortunately, um, and then you can support your answers
yes,
or the doing the things in the center
yes.
if you know like not everything, but have a good idea of the
Yeah.
of the laws and regulations and all the framework things and that stuff, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's, you know, and I can tell you that what you're saying is exactly true from my own experience because when I first went in, I probably needed to learn a little bit more in terms of understanding the regulations in particular. When I sat down and actually read that document properly, I had so much more I could talk about with parents. You're exactly right. You know, because
Yeah,
you can actually say, well, you know, this is what I'm required to do in my role. And then
yeah,
you can also have a different approach where you can say, but I'd like to hear your point of view and why you think we need to be doing this and can I show you
sure,
this? And, you know, so that's exactly right, what you're saying. I completely agree with
yeah,
you. Um,
yeah,
and you also, I'm still learning. You can just keep learning because you work with a different group every year. So,
yeah.
you know, different people. But it's such an enjoyable job. It's a really good profession to be a part of, early childhood.
Yeah,
Mm.
I think in general it will be always more difficult deal with the parents than with the kids, because yeah, I think in general it's difficult. But I think if you can communicate to the parents that you really care for their kids and they really feel that, that helps a lot.
That's right. Yeah. And you know, it's one thing I say when I've had students before as well in a workplace, when I say to them, your responsibility, you might think your responsibility is only to the children, but the Code of Ethics says you have a responsibility to the families as well. But like you're saying, exactly like what you're saying, Eloisa, if you show the families that you really do care for the learning and education of their child, then they are going to feel that positivity as well. So it's all going to work out.
And it's clear. You can notice that clearly. It's like when you meet a person and you really have the feeling if it's an honest person or it's a fake one.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you very much for joining the session tonight. You know, we had a great chat during the learning that occurred. And like I said earlier, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me.
No, that's I always make questions. Don't worry for that. That has been all my life. Okay, thank you so much.
All right,
and good luck. Oh, that's my dog.
Well, you have a good night, Eloisa, and thank you very much again.
You too. Bye.
Okay, see you.